hello and test your audio and turn your cameras on if you want.
To test your audio, you could give a shout out as to where you are in the world.
Yvonne, are you there? Vivian? Yvonne, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Where are you joining us from?
I am calling from Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, good.
But
And
I'm
Vivian?
originally from the Netherlands.
Ooh. Oh, good. Vivian, how are you? You're outdoors now. You need to turn your audio on, the lower left-hand corner. Look in the lower left-hand corner and you'll see the audio, a little microphone symbol, and just click on it.
So it's not muted, but I don't think it's connected correctly.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm in Malta.
Okay.
Malta.
Wonderful.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
it's after 10, so is it okay if we check, make sure everyone can hear us okay?
I see Powell. Powell is in.
Hey!
Hey,
Hey.
Powell,
Good.
welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, I did open up a chat in case you're having any problems and need to contact us by chat. You'll see it in the right-hand corner. Normally, we like to just interact with the people on the screen. So feel free to ask questions and if you want to ask a question and let us know, or else click on and at the right moment ask your question. All right, so we're fortunate today to have Fons Trompenaars with us, and Fons, of course, has been in the field of culture and management and all the related things like change and corporate culture and all that. He's been very much involved in researching and talking about it for decades. I met Fons about 22 years ago. I've had the pleasure of working with him on various occasions, and I just want to say that I've always been very impressed with the work he's done. He's certainly published prolifically, he and particularly Charles Hampton Turner, and he is going to be talking with us today. And I was wondering if I could go ahead and introduce Fons. Fons, if you would say hello, and then also if you wouldn't mind telling us how did this all start with Fons Trompenaars and THT and the whole idea of what it's become.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome everybody. It's an honor to be so much attended, and it's wonderful to have an interactive side to it as well, because you know in keynotes you don't have that opportunity often. You're just a sender, but I hope we can create an atmosphere where we invite you to ask questions and especially disagree. That would be great. And then we immediately call it a dilemma, and on which we work. So thank you for attending. What I could say in a nutshell is that having a French mother and a Dutch father has helped me to make a decision when I graduated at the Free University of Amsterdam as a business economist. Now in the Netherlands that means 6 years, very broad. You go from the generic economics to more what we call MBA now. It's organizational behavior, more the organizational side of it, which I chose, and immediately after that did a PhD. And I'm talking now between 79 and 82, when I can see many of you were not even born. And it's interesting because the topic was exciting, but there was nobody who said, gee, culture and business, that's an interesting topic. They were puzzled because we just got used to, yeah, let's say the Anglo-Saxons telling the world how you run a business. And now there was some people that suddenly say, yeah, but in France it's done differently than in the US or in Japan. But anyway, I did my research on comparing 10 refineries of Shell, the oil company that is half Dutch, half English. We say that in that order. And it's quite interesting in a research where I looked at the effect of national culture on organizational culture. And then joined Shell for 8 years, where I practiced a bit what I preached, namely how can we apply this cultural stuff in one of the most international firms in the world, as Shell at the time had 8,000 full-time expatriates, which after the World Bank, I think was the company with most of full-time expatriates. So it was a wonderful world I could live in. Then the topic became popular and I was invited for speeches and I don't know what. And I said, why don't I start my business in that area? Which I did first as a trainer. We trained a lot of young people going abroad. And I'm saying that for a purpose. Most of the work we did was focused on one country. It was a group getting ready for Singapore or a group getting ready for Nigeria. And that has changed dramatically over time. In the late 90s, when we were about 20 people doing this work, I realized that it should be more, let's say, rooted in organization. So we went into consulting and then quickly realized between 95 and 99 that our clients became so big that we couldn't deal with it. And I'll give you one interesting statistic. There was one invoice to a client where the travel cost of our people was higher than our fees. And then you have to get worried. So I said, gee, let's go to one of the big 4 consulting firms. Because it's in my backyard, I went to KPMG. We were bought by KPMG, but with quite some independent stuff. And cutting a long story, after 2 years, it was dissolved because of the Sarbanes-Oxley law, where you couldn't mix consulting with training and accounting. So we bought ourselves back, and we did the same 15 years thereafter, because in 2015, again, we went to KPMG for the same reasons, with one additional one. We need deep pockets for developing digital products. What was the type of work we did? And by the way, yeah, let me finish the KPMG story. After 2.5 years, we again separated because there were not enough synergies, except on the digital side, where we did a lot of interesting work with them. I'm saying all this because our work was very much in the area of mergers and acquisitions, how to integrate cultural differences. We went into the world of internationalization, obviously, and corporate identity, namely, you know, the introduction of values and how do you make them work. Also, the educational market, we have done quite some work because I teach myself with young students at the Free University of Amsterdam, my old university. And do a lot of fun stuff with them. I love this generation. They could have been my children in terms of age, but it's an exciting environment in where the world has changed from a Dutch university doing everything in Dutch. Now the minority is Dutch. It's a reflection of Amsterdam, where I live and where I teach. 53% of people in Amsterdam don't have Dutch parents. Okay. So the beauty of the world we're living in today is that you don't have to travel to go international. You know, you are in Miami and you see a sign, we speak English here, and they're lying because it's all Spanish, right? As Jerry knows very well. So that is, in short, a long introduction into our history.
And yeah, Richard, did you want to follow on?
Well, you know, I've been working as a licensee under Fons for 5 or 6 years. And when it went dark, when you went into the KPMG world there, it actually afforded me an opportunity to go deeper into the theory. And one of the things that I benefited immediately from in getting back in touch with you as you became private again was some access to the e-learning tools. And one of the things as a trainer that I don't think a lot of people can recognize immediately with something is there's such an excellent recognition of the academic contributions to this field. And one of the reasons I mention that is because coming from Europe for a long time and back to the US or North America, there's not really an understanding of culture. People have a difficult time explaining it beyond hamburgers and blue jeans, as well as just being nice. You know, there's a level of respect that is really on the tips of professionals, but there's no understanding beyond that. So there's a lot of, for me, there's always a lot of excitement thinking about where this can go in the North American territory right now. Because the mixing of cultures is a tremendous new wave that's happened here. And, you know, the words that you were talking about 5 or 6 years ago of going from crisis to crisis is happening right now. And it's with people. And it's also chasing the new terminology of the day. Like, we got to do equity and inclusion. We got to have civility. You got to have a check the box training and then you're okay. And it's going back 3 months later of people really being concerned about not going in the right direction. So bringing this information here is really important. And so Fons, I'm really interested what you have done. I know you teach, so you're bringing it to the teaching level, but what about the education industry? What about the THT approach and model in the education industry? If you wouldn't mind mentioning something about that.
No, sure. You know, obviously there are a lot of people in our field, highly respected people that I love. If I quote Edward Hall, Ed Shine, for me are the heroes. And interestingly enough, they were coming from the US. So there's a lot of knowledge in the US that is very valuable. I fully agree that one of the challenges of humanity is how do we deal with the diversity, since we're so close to each other physically by travel and by the internet. It's a bit naive to think that all these, let's say, processes will lead to one culture. There will be perhaps one culture, but the culture is characterized by diversity. It's a bit the challenge we have in Europe. So I fully agree with that challenge. Now, our approach to that is that we help people to give words to things they already experienced. I think a lot of the things you experience in your own family, being a father or a child, or a grandfather or a grandchild, are very comparable in terms of differences as could be applied in national differences. I also think that generational differences, gender differences, can be very much helped by the same way of thinking. Now, what is that way of thinking? That we have labels to say, hey, there is a tendency for going another way than perhaps another group would do. And what applies to an American vis-a-vis a Dutch person might apply between a man and a woman. Now, obviously, before I go on in more detail, it's a normal distribution. You can't say all the males are like this and all the females are like that. But to be honest, out of practical experience, having a wife and 3 daughters, and by the way, 2 dogs who are female too, the atmosphere we have in-house is quite different from friends that I have who have 3 sons. I already see the 2 grandchildren that are male and 1 that is female. My God, you know, the boys hit each other physically and the daughters separate them. Now, these are obviously stereotypes, but the point I'm trying to make, the models we have produced to categorize differences can be applied to all kinds of diversity. And Richard, to your point, that could help America too. I don't believe that all the problems are international. I very often see that if a young American female talks with a old Ghanese male, which is the world of today, you can't just say, oh, it's American versus Ghanese, or it's male versus female, or it's young versus old. It's that combination that leads to dilemmas on the one hand, on the other hand. So our work characterizes, we try to help people with tooling, also our apps do a lot of diagnostics. We have a gender app, we have a generation app, we have a risk app, we have a managing change app, whatever. And it diagnoses differences observed by people who are in the situation. That's why it's an app. And then we say, fine, we are different. This leads to dilemmas. And that's what I'm missing a bit in the literature, except us. We have written book after book because nobody reads them. We keep on writing. Is that the diversity leads to dilemmas. If you are more individualistic, regardless if it's your passport, your gender, or whatever, you are more individualistic and you deal with a more group-oriented team, then what do you do with your reward structure? Now, that's a dilemma. And so our second approach, next to the diagnostics, the modeling of culture, is how do you deal effectively with dilemmas? And we support that all with digital tools. That's in essence what we do. And some examples, because at a certain moment, mergers and acquisitions were our big thing. And we did a lot on the dilemmas between two companies, and then reconcile them, which is a way of a creative dialogue between the parties. We have applied this to headquarters in Detroit. Let's roll this out, and oh bloody hell, the French don't accept this, and what to do? Now, that's a dilemma, and we help them to solve that. Now, final point, the funny thing is that a lot we learn in consulting and training in business, we present to the students and we make cases. So in the educational world, we try to use similar language, similar philosophies, and I think because of the topic, the managers that we deal with in business can be treated quite similarly with students. The only difference is sometimes we go a bit deeper in the scientific background. My favorite is, and you will most probably like the quotes by Alfred Schutz, a phenomenologist, which I will never mention to managers, is that if you observe a social system, you should never forget that atoms and molecules don't talk back. And that's the big advantage of natural science over social science. While if you are a social scientist, you have to take a description of the second order. Namely, you have to describe that is described by people you observe. And that is quite a different methodology. Now, that kind of stuff, managers say, are you kidding? That's not of my interest, but students love that. So it's going a bit deeper, but the topics are very similar. Let me just stop here.
Let me thank you, Fons, Richard. Before we go further, I think it'd be good if we could take just a moment to have each of the people who are on board with us participating. If you could just briefly say who you are and where you're coming to us from, and if you have a question for Fons, please feel free to ask it. Start with Vivian. Might want to turn your sound on. There you go.
Yes, I'm Italian. I live in Malta, and I've created my company that they call Global Mindset Development, GMD Malta, to help company here in Malta that Malta became a really international place in few years, so I helped companies to deal with multicultural teams and develop their diversity and inclusion policy. So I read many of the books that you and Mr. Trump wrote. So I was really curious about this like virtual meeting, but I don't have any questions so far.
Thank you, Viviana. Very welcome. And what a beautiful sight behind you. It's really getting jealous here.
I want to go to Malta.
Yeah, let's go.
It's a beautiful place. It's a
Beautiful,
beautiful
yes.
Yeah.
Yvonne, you want to have anything to ask Fons? And if you would introduce yourself first.
Hey, I'm Yvonne David. I am calling in from Atlanta, Georgia, in the States. I'm originally from the Netherlands as well. I've been here for 21 years, and I've been in this field for as many years. And what I do is mostly intercultural intelligence and I coach individuals and I train teams. And I've followed Fons for years. In fact, when I just got my master's, I applied for a job at his company. So that's kind of like a full circle for me, but I don't have questions at the moment.
Okay.
Good. And Yvonne, where are you from in the Netherlands?
I am from West Friesland.
West Friesland. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's in the north. It's in the north. It's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Good.
Thank you,
Thank
Yvonne.
you.
Dr. Siemens?
Oh yeah, hello. My name is Holger. I'm German, coming from the Dutch border in Germany, near Aachen, and I work in England, and I teach Fons Trompenaars and Hofstede's theories, apart from many other stuff in the University of Northampton and other locations around the world.
Wonderful. Welcome, Holger. Welcome.
Yeah, bedankt. Yes, I teach your 7 theories and watched many of your videos, including your TED video, where you joke about your parents. That that doesn't make you Belgium when you French mother and a Dutch father, or the other way around. No?
Yes. Good. Good.
Suzanne, you want to take a moment?
Yeah, I'm Suzanne Sterling. I am in Canada and I'm based in Thunder Bay. The last few months I've been doing some work in the territories, which is highly indigenous population, some population, a number of immigrants, and then folks that have come from other parts of Canada. So it's been a process. We're setting up a new organization, and there's all sorts of cultures represented, including business angels from across Canada and those that want to be business angels. So we're going to have both national and corporate culture classes all over the place.
Okay. And we have, is it Indisi? Indisi?
Yes.
You want to say hello?
Yes, I don't have my video working to show my face, but I also work with Richard at a college here in Maryland in the US, and I'm not involved in teaching things related to diversity or equity and inclusion, but I'm always curious about changes in demographics in workplaces or in outside in living areas, and I always try to be up to date with what's going on. And I was interested in the fact that Fons has done some research in these areas, and even in his introduction, it became a little interesting too, because it sounds like he's been around the world. He has trained people from different parts of the world. And I'm really curious to learn more as the presentation goes on. At the moment, I don't have a question, but I'm very pleased that I'm part of this group right now.
Same here.
Thank you. Is it Mono? Mono, are you there? Mono?
Mono is at work. And
okay. All right, Insu? Insu?
Hi. Can you see my face?
Yes, great, wonderful.
Okay, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Insu, calling from Seoul, Korea. It's almost 11:30. I'm very interested in the intercultural training, and I just retired from my first job. I used to work at a so more than 30. Besides my main job, and I have been doing the training work as a freelancer. So I retired from my first job to focus more on training. So I'm very much interested in getting the license from the Fons company. And I got business degree, MBA, also master's degree, intercultural management. So I'm thinking of getting PhD or DBA soon to set up my own company in South Korea. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Same here, Insu, and then we'll make sure we'll do something in the Asian region as well. And we have worked with Jae-ho Park, who is professor in South Korea, and we'll make sure that you contact each other because he has been working with us for 20 years. Wonderful that you so late are joining us.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Thank you. Powell? Is it Powell? You want to join us? Hello?
I talked to Powell, and he's coming in now.
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go.
There you
Here we go. I just like which picture I will use for that. And here we go. I go outside and you see the beautiful Crete. It's just wonderful today. A little bit chilly outside with 20 degrees. But yes, I'm actually Polish, but moved to the Netherlands 24 years ago and used to work for THT for Philips projects, mainly in Poland and Belgium. That's why I believe I moved to Belgium finally, because I loved it so much in turnout. So now I live in Brussels. So happy to work with Fons in just 3 weeks in Lisbon. Can't wait, Fons. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Paul.
Let's see, Colin. Colin, are you able to join us? Colin? How about Serge? Serge, are you there?
Hello, can you hear?
Yes.
Hear me?
How are you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting me attend at Fons. I've been following you since the late 80s, early 90s. So for some reason, the work that I'm doing in the last 2 to 3 years, which is a lot of agile transformation work and trying to shift people's mindset into a servant leadership mindset, has pulled me to pick up your book again, your original book on writing the ways of culture.
Yeah.
And so I've been just trying to reintroduce myself to what you've been doing and the kind of work that you're engaged in.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
Wonderful, Serge. We also wrote about servant leadership across cultures, and I'm very happy to hear you are using it in combination of changing the mindset from a more stable to an agile work environment, because it's a lot of work we do recently in that area.
Very good.
It's the missing piece within the agile industry, I believe.
You know, the title, Serge, is, and I do that very often, is that the more you go agile, the more you need stability. It's very, otherwise we get another fashion, and then after we lost the war, we go back to stability, and that's not what you need, both. So I wrote an article, the more you go digital, the more you need analog. And I'm doing that to tease a bit the audience that I'm speaking to. I mean, not this afternoon, but in general, is that we have to be very careful that any value disconnected from its opposite leads to a pathology, with one exception, and that is integrity, because integrity connects opposites. And that is what I very often try to do. So in artificial intelligence, what we call that the meta dilemma, is who's controlling the controller. Because if you just look at the Ford CEO saying that he thinks the self-driving car will only be a success if the driver keeps in control of what is controlling him or her. I love that statement because I fully agree with him. And so who's controlling the controller is a question. And what we do from the cultural perspective, some cultures start with serving and then worry about leading, and others start with leading and worry about serving. But in all cultures, you need both. And Serge, in agile environments, it's wonderful to see that a lot of stuff can be applied to make agile companies work.
Fons, I gave my book away and I just got my replacement book in the mail.
Oh, wonderful.
Like 2 days ago, so it's right here.
Oh, wonderful.
Since you have the microphone, Kim, it's your turn.
Oh, okay. My name is Kim Barker, and I teach at Eastern Michigan University. And I first met Fons at the International Society for Organization Development and Change Conference in 2014, which was a life-changing conference for me. It was at the end of my my doctoral work, and it was just an amazing conference. One of my favorite sayings of Fons's is, "Culture is not a side dish; it's the main dish." So that has really meant a lot to me over the years. One thing, Fons, could you elaborate a little bit more on how you came up with a dilemma approach?
Okay,
in my mind, it's the best cultural approach out there.
Yeah, no, I'm so proud of it because it's not mine. And yeah, dilemmas are 1,000 years of teachings from Aristotle. Even the word comes from the Greek, so we are 1,000 years back. But in my case, I had my first working day in Shell, late '82. I just was in the end of my PhD period to write the last little chapters and what have you. And I joined Shell, and the head of group planning, which was quite a known guy at the time, because group planning did scenario planning in Shell. And he said, "Fons, I heard you did a dissertation on cultural differences. You should talk to Charles Hamden Turner and read his article." And and I was reading an article by Charles, and it really impressed me because the article not only summarized my thesis, but also went far beyond it. And I'm saying that because he never read my thesis at the time he wrote the article. And it was about, it was called A Tale of Two Paradigms, how we in the West could learn from the East and apply it to the oil industry. Very interesting. And one example of the article is that in the Western world at the time, I'm talking about early 80s, the client was seen as a empty gas tank that you need to fill. That's it. While in Asia, obviously a much more diffuse concept of the client, that was you need a shop, and you are not the empty gas tank, you are a passenger with a lot of needs. And he said, if we can combine the two, we're in great shape. And that's when the Shell shops were introduced and what have you. So I was impressed by the article, and the guy said, the group planning guy, talk to Charles because I think you need to meet. And I had him on the phone, and he said, can you send me a copy of your dissertation? And a week later, he called me back. I said, Fons, I think we can work together. I reconciled all your dilemmas. And I said, what is this guy talking about? And he said, yeah, Fons, I was afraid that you were another person putting the world on bipolar scales. And I still didn't get him. And he said, yeah, Fons, let's take one of the most popular dimensions, individual versus collective. If you are an individualist at the cost of the community, you're an egoist and it doesn't work. If you are a collectivist at the cost of the individual, you're a communist and it doesn't work. So if both ends of your scales don't work, why don't you try to combine? And that was something that we tried to practice from there. And so the whole idea of dilemmas was really initiated by Charles. And that was, in a nutshell, the beginning of a relationship from '82 to today. We are writing a book on the effect of culture on tax, why some countries have VAT and others don't, and direct and indirect tax, so the cultural roots of tax systems. And we're talking now about 2019. So in total, I think we have worked together 37 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the whole dilemma stuff, but it took me 15 years to really understand what he really was saying. And once you are infected by the dilemma virus, you say, gee, you know, you get statements like, the value of a value does it help you to reconcile your dilemmas? And that's why we today believe in yin and yang values. Sorry if I sometimes divert, but I'll come back to the topic. We were with CDPQ in Montreal, and there was the head of HR of CDPQ said, Fons, can you help us? Because we were almost killed by our values. I said, well, sorry, what do you mean? Is we have a set of values that I'll have my wife, there she is.
No.
Yeah. So otherwise.
Hi, Mrs. Trompenaars.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah. So I said, well, what are the values? He said, no, we had a value of ambition, a value of collaboration, and a value of innovation. And in 2008, it almost killed our company because ambition led to, we took too many risks. And then we got innovation, nobody understood our products. And collaboration meant we could nobody individually hold responsible. So what to do? And she showed me some pictures of elevators where on one door was ambition and on the other door was prudence, innovation, rigor, and collaboration, individual accountability. Now, I think any value of an organization should be, yeah, if you like, collaborating with its opposite. And then she said, yeah, that's nice. I introduced that, Fons, on the basis of your work, but how can we make this practical? So we took the board and the CEO said, let's start with what are the behaviors I can show so that I can say, I use prudence to be more ambitious. And people were in the room were, wow, this is high stuff, but how can we get this practical? And he said, the CEO said, brilliant guy, by the way. He said, I'm a non-executive director of Cirque du Soleil. And the people in the trapeze are on, they don't want to take more risks because they're on the top of their skills. How can we get them into more risk taking? And the only way to solve it is to make them head of the task force for the safety nets. And he said, since they were trusting the safety net so well, they took more risk and they fell less. In other words, if you have more caution, you can be more courageous. One value can stimulate the other value, its opposite, to higher levels. Now, obviously known as yin and yang and what have you, But how many organizations do I see that have one, if you like, lopsided values, and 5 years later they go to the opposite because it didn't work? It's a bit like shareholder value. What a bullshit. You know, if it's not compensated by stakeholder value, and it's only one that can be helped by the other. And now those are the things that you learn how to make this more effective. Another one-liner is the value of a value does it help you to reconcile dilemmas? So you get yin and yang values. Another one-liner is that a value disconnected from its opposite leads to a pathology, etc., etc. Now that takes a long time before you get not only the understanding of that, but also what does it mean in practice. And it's wonderful if you are in a merger and acquisition environment where you say, gee, one company has a top-down philosophy of leadership. The company they bought has a bottom-up one. Is there a leadership model that can combine the two? And obviously there is, and that's called servant leadership. Is a father or a mother top-down or bottom-up? Now, a good father and a good mother is both. But some have a tendency to start top-down and then worry about bottom-up, and others do it the other way around. But effective leaders do both. And that is a bit what we're trying to do with dilemma thinking. And yeah, we have 6 steps how to do it. Now, if we go to our license training, what we are trying to do in 2 days is the first day is about diagnostics, corporate culture, national culture. And in that first day, we say, and that's how you can use the tools. And then in the second day, it's more about dilemma reconciliation. And once we know the differences, how can we get them together in a more effective way? And let me stop here because that's I think, enough for your very short question, Kim.
Zach, we haven't heard from you. You want to say hello and ask Fons any questions?
Yeah, so to give a little bit about my background, I've known Fons for a long time, 20 plus years through my father, Jerry. And this last summer I worked in Amsterdam with Fons for about 6 months, was doing some of the content development on his apps, and also a game he's making to sort of utilize the the cultural dilemmas and in a way for traveling to different countries in a game-like setting. And I've done a lot of, I've worn a little different hats. I've worked briefly in HR, briefly in customer service. Right now I'm in the school system in Florida, doing some substitute teaching, but in the fall I'm starting as a full-time teacher in physics and chemistry. So I have a bachelor's degree in physics and a master's in industrial organizational psychology. So I see this as a good way to sort of reconcile, a lot of my background and experience. But yeah, I'm very much interested in all of Fons's work. So I've done a lot of travel. I've worked overseas in Japan, Amsterdam, the U.S. I grew up in Australia, and I've always been immersed in culture from a very young age. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of this webinar.
Zach, where are you at right now?
In Florida, about 3 feet away from Jerry.
Oh, okay. Because your background is very scholarly looking.
Yeah.
Fons, if I might suggest, is it maybe a time to show the group the few slides that you prepared?
Yeah, that would be great, Richard. I think the slides will also introduce a bit what we're trying to do in the license training. Huh? Perhaps to give it a bit of context to Richard, to say a bit about after I left my last marriage with KPMG, I started to say, gee, what can I do best to get this material over to other people. And we distinguish three markets: educational, professional, consultants, trainers, and corporate. So what we're trying to do with the transfer of our IP and apps is to license people. Now, there were in the history of PhD a lot of people licensed already, and also a lot of people that have been trained by being part of our organization. So that is one side of the coin, namely how to license people in a, we started with 5 days, and then people said, I would like to attend, but 5 days is too long, so it went to 4 days, 3 days, now it's 2 days. Anyway, even 5 days is not enough, but in 2 days you can get the base. And what we're trying to do is we lighten the role of the educator, the role of the trainer, the role of the corporate person in HR or what have you, by supporting them with two things: e-learning. So every licensed training starts with an invitation to go through the e-learning. And depending on the main topic, it could be either the 7 dimensions or corporate culture. And it depends a bit. We'll ask the participants before they go in what their main interest is. So we like to really focus. And it's foreground, background. We do both in both cases. 7 dimensions in the background, corporate culture, or vice versa. And then the second day, dilemma reconciliation. And we have also an e-learning on dilemma reconciliation. So that when people come to the license training, they are on the same page. In the beginning, we didn't have the e-learning. And you had people who worked with us for 20 years getting a bit bored by things you do when you haven't used it at all. And now we said, okay, go through the e-learning so that we're on one page. Then the digital stuff, we have an interactive ebook which explains the reading of our 7 dimensions corporate culture dilemma reconciliation. We have the beginnings of a game. We are trying to get into gamification. And which is wonderful, because I believe that the best way to get our material over is to be engaged in some kind of a gaming environment, and get the dilemmas in your face and see if you can accumulate points and what have you. So that is at least the philosophy behind the licensee training. And perhaps we can go to the slides. I don't know, Richard, are you putting it?
Should be able to see it now. I think everybody. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So just tell me if you want to go. I'm controlling it for you. Sorry, but if you want to go forward, just tell me. Next slide.
I'll give you but one little hint on this slide is we would like to focus in Naples, Florida, on the leading cultural change. In other words, people interested in the change process of culture. Although we will discuss a lot of generic stuff like the 7 dimensions and corporate culture, we will try to apply many things in cultural change, because half of our clients today, and correct me if I'm wrong, are very much interested in cultural change. We want to become agile, but our culture is not ready for it. Even mergers and acquisitions are cultural changes by integrating 2 companies, etc., etc. That's why we chose for this one. If we go to the next slide.
Did Richard Forrest put that slide on there?
Yes. Good, eh?
I mean, because of the forest.
No, it's the forester. Eh? It's the forester.
I've never heard that joke before, Kimberly.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, okay, this is the brochure. For those interested, we can send you the brochure. This is the first page. If we go to the next one. So, for example, if we would go and talk about cultural change. We will introduce, and again, it's not guaranteed yet. We will really, for those who subscribe, we will ask them, you know, what is your main topic? And the main topic could be cultural change, could be the 7 dimensions, we'll hear. But if it would be cultural change, and take this as an example, we would use, for example, the app that could help you either as an educator or as a professional or as a corporate person, how to use the digital stuff in order to get into the wonderful environment of teaching that, and in this case, about cultural change. Now, it is working, but let's not do so in view of time. But we will make sure that you get a copy of these slides. So if you say, oh, I want to look a bit at the cultural change app, then that's fine. You have a QR. It might even work on your screen now, but keep that for later. Our idea, and if you go to the next slide, Richard, the end result could have been, these are screenshots, is that in gray, you have, and that's the first slide you see, or the first screen you see after you filled in a questionnaire of 14 items. It takes about 7 minutes on average for filling it in. I even use it in workshops on the spot. I use it in keynotes when my topic is managing change. So I ask people, hey, take a picture of the QR and go for it. And then within 7 minutes, I get a full overview of that company, or even if it's a professional group like CIOs, and you get a picture like this. And then the next screen has a menu, by the way, that is revealed by a hamburger menu, you know, the 3 stripes. Especially people beyond 25, I need to explain, because young people immediately go for there, and some are eternally looking for what the hell do I do next. But it's called the hamburger menu, and you get this as a result, namely profiles compared, key dilemmas, and reconciliation and resolution. So if you click on profiles compared, could you go to the next? Then you get the left-hand side, and you see in gray how people see the company. In our model, the role-oriented, what we call Eiffel Tower culture, the biggest one here in gray. We have the power culture, which is more the family culture. We have the incubator culture, top left-hand corner, as the person-oriented culture, and the task-oriented culture, top right-hand corner, as the guided missile. And I don't want to get into details, but I wanted to show the workings of the app. And we say, wow, you know, the big dilemmas here are between the role-oriented culture and the task-oriented culture. Now, let me apply dilemma thinking very much in contrast with the famous change models. Most of the change models, not all, by the way, are you have a culture and you kill it and you go for the new culture. And we say that's naive. You have a culture, and the fact that you have that culture is your strength, although it has handicaps. But don't throw it away. Enrich your culture by the opposite. And that is the right-hand screen, also in the same menu of comparing cultures. You can click on it, and you get results of the dilemmas. And the dilemmas in this case, for example, is that on the one hand, we need top-down management based on expertise, which is typically the Eiffel Tower role culture. On the other hand, we want to empower people and be bottom-up in our research, in our leadership style. And we have dilemmas in 5 areas: leadership, communication, decision-making, strategy, and a 5th one I don't recollect. And what we do, if you are a consultant, is you have a quick scan of what is the corporate culture. I used it, by the way, I used this yesterday with a client who wanted to work agile, And by the way, they had other profiles, but no, not so much different, but they were a bit like the bottom two had to be replaced by the top two. I said, don't replace it, enrich it. So we discussed with them the dilemmas, and perhaps Richard, the next slide, are the dilemmas like top down versus bottom up. And we do a dilemma exercise where we say, if there is a dilemma, track the line. We call that charting the dilemma, step number 2. And you get this. So bottom up is you give people authority on their performance. That's the American dream. On basis of the performance, you can go to the top of the organization. And then we have the opposite, status by seniority or role, ascribed status, as we call it in our 7 dimensions. Then we give the extremes. If you can give the next, Richard, it's a build up. The risk, yeah, the one back. Yeah,
oh, sorry.
Back. No, don't worry, if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lost Democratic Leadership is a book title with the subtitle, The Dutch and Swedish Disease. You can have too much democracy, everybody involved in a discussion, and nothing happens. If you go to the next one, top down, without any feedback from the bottom, is follow the leader. It's the dictator. It doesn't work. And then the next one is a model, the servant leader. The servant leader combines bottom up with top down. It's the person that holds the ladder for others to climb. And that is a model that works across all cultures. So this is an example of what we want to teach people is, can you understand the model we're using? Now, in this case, corporate culture, but it could be 7 dimensions. What, with the help of apps or not, we also have paper and pencil stuff. We have internet access. You diagnose the dilemmas coming out of the apps of whatever tool you use. And then to say, and what do we do to reconcile it? So if we have another example, which is very modern, Richard, could you go to the next one? Is, do you focus on planning and optimization? And if you go and click, you see the exaggeration of that. Could you click one more? Is aim, aim, aim. Oh, I forgot to shoot. And for Holger, we call that the German approach. And then we have the Californian approach, as shoot, aim. Namely, we have to be rapid in our launch, but it's not good enough. And you know the concept minimal viable product in agile organizations. Hey, click one more time, Richard, and you see the minimal viable product is where the product is good enough to launch and to learn quickly. And now these are examples of dilemma reconciliation, which I think is the future of management thinking. We can't be there with bipolar scales. We need to, and what we do, Richard, in the educational field is how to teach the students with the help of digital products this way of thinking, how to diagnose cultural differences, and merge them with your own strengths, because teachers, professors, very often, for good reasons, have their own methodologies. We want to enrich them rather than threaten them with our way of thinking. So let's say Holger says, now this Trompenaars model, you know, I'd rather go for Hofstede. Fine. But what we could offer is, yeah, if you have two cultures where one is uncertainty avoiding and the other isn't, what do? It's a dilemma. And are there ways to reconcile it, right? So we don't want to threaten existing practices, but enrich them by a deeper way and an extended way of thinking about it. Let me, I think this was the last slide, wasn't it? Oh yeah, there is perhaps one that you could download today, a Culture for Business app, which is available in the App Store. The others are web apps that are done through us, but the Culture for Business app, the beauty of that app is that depending on your own profile, which are the 9 questions in the beginning, you are compared to a country, 144 countries in this app. You're compared to a country of your choice, And then, and I learned this from Jerry, what we call the zipper. So it starts with the biggest delta, going to the smallest delta, that's why the zipper. And then if you click on the difference, you get tips in management, negotiation, and meetings. And I think the unique selling point of this one is that not everybody gets the same tips, because it depends on the delta between your profile and the profile of the country of interest. What we do in our licensee training, we use this app, and we give people a case. So if you are a trainer or a professor like Holger, and you say, hey students, here is a case, download the app. By the way, the first country is for free. So, you know, you can choose one country, and use the app to get the solution to the case. Now, obviously, it's not always very precise, but that's what students need to do, is to build the bridge between the results of the app and the little case. We don't want to make it too obvious, because they have to keep on learning. That's a bit, yeah, that's a bit the approach.
Let me comment on that. I've run your app is with my students. So we had about 30 students in my class, and your colleague also has a app, Hofstede. And the students, for some reason, found it easier to connect with the Hofstede apps. But I must say, I like your 7-dimensional model, and following your inspirational TED talk that I've seen, where you already cracked the line, you know, and I'm familiar with this. I try to find a good way to bring this form of cracking the line to my students. It's a very difficult task. Some students get it, but most of the time you need to do this across 2 years before they actually understand this. Do you have some advice in terms of how we are addressing this concept of non-duality?
Yeah, for me, practical examples make an enormous difference. So most of our cases, you know, many cases, Holger, as you know, are cases where there's one best solution, you know, and very often based, but correct me if I'm wrong, very often based on adapting to a culture. You see that a lot of the people approaching cultural differences, you go to China, what would you do in China to be more successful? And it's adapting to Chinese culture, and we call that the first R. We have 4 R's. The first R is recognition. The second R is respect. But respect is not only respect to the Chinese, it's also respect for yourself. And then the third R is reconciliation. And the fourth R is realization. Now, why I'm saying that is because if your case is a dilemma, students immediately say, but there is no easy answer here. Or if you are in multicultural groups, which is the new world we're living in, is multicultural. To whom are you adapting? And they, you know, obviously, as I said earlier, it took me 15 years to really understand the depth of what Charles was saying about dilemmas. It takes a long time, but I think that's the role of a good teacher. And let me now be practical. Select the right cases. Select also the right apps, because I know the Hofstede app and I know all the alternative apps, but they're all on generic advice on a fairly abstract level. So you can do anything with it you like. It's not very specific, and everybody gets the same tips. And we believe that an American going to Japan should get other tips than a French person going to Japan. And that took a lot of work to develop, but we managed to do so. But I could help you, Holger, with a lot of cases, but also even the questions, you know, perhaps from your reading or looking at TEDx, the car accident question that would you help your friend by lying or not? Now, you ask your students, who think this is a nice situation to be in? And I've never had a student who said, nice situation to be in. Why? Oh, it's a dilemma because everybody in the room wants to help friends. And everybody in the room has something with the truth. I said, gee, even in a multicultural group, there is nobody who will say, this is a nice situation to be in. So the dilemma is human, but then you ask, what would your answer be? Would you help your friend by lying or not? Then you get cultural differences. If students get these type of examples, and very simple examples, but experiential examples, that they feel it, then I think teaching becomes much easier, rather than to say, oh, in Japan I would lie and in America I would not. No, you are a multicultural group. What would you do in this situation? And by the way, what I learned in Japan, Holger, is that the Japanese said, we need to convince our friend to tell the truth in court himself, so we can talk to the judge to lower the sentence for his courage. And then you have a reconciliation that works in every world. It's again a long answer, but I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And we can help you with the dilemmas. We have in our database, Holger, we have 43,000 dilemmas.
Oh, very good.
Captured by a lot of workshops where we start, what is your dilemma? And we even have what we call the 10 golden dilemmas. So part of the licensee is that we will help you with those products.
Fons, before we get out of here and close up, Serge has some questions that he's asked in the discussion group chat. And Serge, do you want to ask Fons anything before we go?
Well, so I apologize. I thought I was thinking we could integrate this, and I also didn't want to take over the session with the questions that have been running through my mind, because a lot of the work that everyone on this call does, I actually take that perspective and lens when going into a transformation engagement. And so I'll pick a couple that I think have been more recent, and if maybe I can shoot an email to Fons, I'll contact you via LinkedIn, and when you have a moment, it'd be great to gain your perspective. One of them is really about Daniel Pink's whole intrinsic motivation talk that I think everyone's familiar with, that probably comes from psychology back in the 60s, 70s, but the idea of autonomy, mastery, purpose.
Yes.
I believe that's agnostic to culture. I think all teams thrive in that environment, and I wanted to know if you agree, disagree, or have a different perspective.
Yeah, no, it's Serge, wonderful question. Let me give you the short and a bit longer answer. Yes, I do believe. But the best guarantee for self-mastery is to let loose. And why I'm saying, whenever I hear one approach, I add the opposite. And I think in a lot of martial arts, control, mastery, is done by letting loose.
Yes.
And
yoga.
Yeah, and yeah. No, I'm not a yoga practitioner that much, but I have done some reading around it. But I personally believe another way of saying this is that a lot of the approaches, and by the way, I appreciate Daniel Pink a lot. I think Daniel Pink is one of the best thinkers in the area. I think he's from Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And I love this cartoon, RSA, cartoon-based motivational. If you haven't seen it, go for it. It's Daniel Pink on motivation, fantastic, in the YouTube. So I fully believe what he's saying, but I always say and add the opposite to it. And that's really what I learned from Charles. Now, there are exceptions, like if you go to the etymological dictionary and you look up integrity, integrity is creating wholeness through the integration of opposites. And that's why if I hear the word self, I say perhaps the best guarantee for self is the team. And great teams consist of very creative individuals. So I'm always saying, hey, he's right as point of departure, but let's especially increase what he thinks is important by its opposite. I hope, and that was the longer answer, Serge, so don't worry.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. So what you just mentioned in integrity was the integration of
opposites,
wholeness through.
Yeah, through decree. So integrity is creating wholeness through the integration of opposites. And
beautiful.
And
that's very motivational for me.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and so ambition without prudence is very risky. Collaboration without individual accountability is very risky. And integrity is the end result of combining all those.
I suggest, I don't know if you know who Ram Dass is.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard of the name.
He has there's a wonderful podcast, and he speaks very deeply about all this work that you've done.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful.
On a more spiritual level, right?
Wonderful.
Yes, he was a Harvard professor that was one of the first people to go to India during the 60s and bring back spirituality as a believe a Zen Buddhist.
Wonderful. Yeah. No, great.
I'm not sure how long, Fons and Richard, you want to continue. We're at
So
11.
how do I sign up to go to Florida?
That's a great way to end it. That's really awesome.
Yeah. No, I think and many of you, I'm sure, are connected with LinkedIn, but we'll make sure that we get your email addresses if we all, and I guess we already have them. We'll send you also the little slides we showed and some other materials if you like.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any closing comments or questions or remarks from anyone? Okay. Fons?
No, Viviana is leaving and says, thank you. I see on my screen. I don't know if that is shared, but Viviana, thank you for attending, and let that be symbolic for all of you. I really hope we get feedback how to improve this. If it should be more content with slides, or rather this kind of dialogue where I like that a bit more, because I can really work on your issues. And yeah, thank you for your time. I know it's almost Easter, although Good Friday is part of Easter. And thank you for taking the freedom, and also Jerry, for your hostmanship. You're really with Suzanne and Kim and Zach. Thank you for organizing that. And Richard, I hope to also once see you in life again, because it's too long ago. And
I'll be there in May, Fons. Thanks so much.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Hey, and again, if you don't have the time to ask questions now, and Paul is also thanking Paul, you too, great time in Greece. Write us emails either through Jerry or ourselves, and we'll be happy to respond to that quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye, Mrs. Trompenaars.
Thank you,
everyone.
Happy
Bye,
Easter.
Pleasure meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Right, having you there.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.